No one wants hardening of the arteries or arteriosclerosis, but have you really thought about stiff arteries and why they're a risk factor in cardiovascular disease? Usually when we think of arteries, we think of cholesterol and LDL and HDL cholesterol. So what's the relationship between stiff arteries and cholesterol?
Well, actually, Vicki, it's cholesterol that makes them stiff. It's a plaque in the artery that makes them stiff. But cholesterol, as we know, we've learned over the last couple of decades, is not the culprit. It's the innocent bystander. And what happens is when there's inflammation in the body, what happens is the cholesterol becomes different. It becomes oxidized, and then it tends to accumulate in arteries, and it makes them stiff. So that's where the stiffness comes from.
Okay, so what's wrong with having a stiff artery?
Well, if it's stiff, it builds up plaque, and it's the plaque that makes it stiff.
So but what's wrong with an artery being stiff and not being elastic?
Well, it's liable to block, okay, and you can't pass much blood through it, and it may even rupture and cause some kind of bleed. So a stiff artery doesn't have that flexibility that allows blood to go through it in a soft, easy way. That's why we like to have nice, soft arteries. And there was a study that was just done that looked at that. It was published in Cell Reports in October of 2012. And basically what they did is they studied another lipoprotein called apolipoprotein E, okay?
That's quite a name.
And there are 4 different kinds of apolipoprotein E's, so it gets more complicated yet. It's like looking at the different kinds of HDL cholesterol. There are 5 different kinds of that and 9 different kinds of LDL, so it gets really complicated. But the neat thing about this study that was published shows that apolipoprotein E, or APOE, is something that's really important in HDL cholesterol that probably gives it its benefit in keeping arteries soft and not stiff.
So how can we make them soft and not stiff?
Well, we can't, okay, if we have a lack of APOE, we don't have much of that, that adds a lot to it. Then we have to rely on what we should be relying anyway, which is lifestyle. We eat the right foods, we exercise, reduce our stress levels, so we do all the things that will help us to reduce inflammation.
Okay, so up until now, people have been saying that having a high HDL is a good thing.
Yes.
So maybe this isn't accurate because it's the ApoE that's in the HDL?
It makes up about 6% of the HDL, and if it's there, as we've learned, because we've done studies on mice where we make it so they genetically don't have any APOE, and when they don't have any APOE in them, they are really subject to having problems with arteriosclerosis, or the stiffening of the arteries.
So now, does fat have an influence on these arteries, whether they're stiff or soft? What's the role that fat plays? We hear about how saturated fats are unhealthy fats. And
if we eat fats that are inflammatory, fats like trans fats, or fats that are the vegetable oils that have been highly processed and damaged as they've been processed.
Or fried foods?
Fried foods are okay as long as you don't cook them too hot, or you have an oil that doesn't handle the heat well.
So maybe not deep fried.
No, even if it's deep fried.
Well, deep fried's pretty hot.
Well, it depends on how hot you make it. If you make it very hot and you're using an oil like flaxseed oil or corn oil or soy oil.
You can't cook with flaxseed oil.
No, well, you can, but you shouldn't.
Yeah.
That's right, because it denatures the oils. So these originally very healthy vegetable oils, when they're processed, they're made in a way that they become inflammatory when they get in the body. So what you're asking me is really what causes the cholesterol to be a problem, or what causes the fat to be a problem. It's inflammation. So when there's a lot of inflammation for whatever reason, that's what starts this whole process of arteriosclerosis and stiffening of our arteries.
Okay, now where do statins fit in with all this?
Well, statins are a way of just really attacking cholesterol, and because cholesterol is what gets deposited in the plaques. So when we have a lot of cholesterol that's oxidized because of inflammation, it goes into the plaque and it eventually builds up and blocks an artery. The statins block the amount of cholesterol that we have. Now, that makes sense to solve this problem of building up plaque, but it makes no sense from the point of view that cholesterol is an indispensable nutrient for our systems, because we must have it to have healthy cell membranes, to make vitamin D, to make most of the sex hormones, and to make some of the neurotransmitters that we have. So cholesterol is an innocent bystander in this process.
I have a question. If your cholesterol's high,
Uh-huh.
can you still have arterial stiffness?
Sure.
I mean, can you still decrease arterial stiffness? I mean,
Yes, by reducing inflammation. See, the part that you're missing here is that inflammation's the culprit. That's what starts the process. There's no inflammation, enjoy a high cholesterol. My cholesterol is close to 300, and a very healthy one because I've got lots of HDL, and of course I exercise, I get 8 hours of sleep most nights, and my lifestyle's healthy.
but what's important is if you have that ApoE, though, in your HDL.
Well, that's true, but you'd have to measure that in a specialty lab, and there are labs that do that, like the Berkeley Heart Lab in California does that. And in some people who have nice high levels of HDL cholesterol and they still have heart attacks, we know that something like that is probably what happens. So we can soften our arteries, for sure.
So what are some ways to measure this vascular stiffness or the stiffness in the arteries? Because I think you have a favorite test that you like to use that not all the doctors use.
No, well, it's a Medicare-approved test, so there's a code for it. So we get reimbursed for it, even with Medicare and almost every insurance. And it's inexpensive. It's like $150 to do the test. And all you do is put a little sensor on the tip of the finger and measure what a pulse wave looks like. And if that pulse wave is flattened out, you know that you have a problem with arterial stiffness. And if not, you're okay. And the amount of the change in the shape of that curve tells you how severe the problem is.
So in Western medicine, normally what they do is carotid ultrasounds
Well, we
and
do
CT scans.
this to find out how much calcium and plaque there is. You might do a coronary arteriogram. They were very popular, especially 20, 30 years ago when they first came out. Because
Those are pretty invasive, though, aren't they?
well, and there's a lot of radiation from it as well, and there can be problems with it because people sometimes have complications from it where they rupture a coronary artery. That's why a surgeon is usually standing by. So when we look at this whole business of stiff arteries and what we can do, the answer really is it's lifestyle. Live a healthy lifestyle. Have plenty of cholesterol around that's the right stuff. Eat a healthy diet. Exercise. Reduce your stress levels. Weigh what you should. And avoid environmental toxins. And chances are...
Avoid inflammation.
Yeah, you're going to avoid inflammation, and you're not going to have a problem with arteriosclerosis.